This tutorial is to show you how to use Lightroom for the computer to develop your photos. First, I'm going to show you the overall screen, and then we'll walk through how to import photos, how to edit photos, and how to export photos. First, you'll notice when you enter into Lightroom that you see this interface. On the left-hand side of the screen, you've got a number of presets that allow you to choose predefined edits that other people have made, and you can apply these presets to any photo that you've imported. At the bottom, you will notice that you have a film strip of all of the images that you have in this current working session that you're editing. On the right-hand side, you will notice that you have all of your editing controls to manipulate and edit photos. And here at the top, you've got a few icons that tell you where you're at: library, develop, map, etc. At this point, I'm now going to import some new unedited files, and you will see how that works. For this next stage, you will notice that I now have the import window open. This import window can be entered by going to File, Import Photos and Videos, and that brings up the import screen. I'll now insert my SD card into my SD card reader, and then I will select that as the source to import. Now, initially, it will bring up all of the images on that SD card, but as I've imported a significant number of these images, those become grayed out very quickly. At this point, I'll hit the import button, and it will begin to import these files. I'm going to pause the recording now and resume when the files are uploaded. At this point now, I have the photos uploaded onto Lightroom. These photos were all shot in RAW format and are now ready to edit. To edit, I move to the Develop tab. At this point now, I have the ability to edit the image. Now, as I stated before, I could go with any number of these presets. So there are a number of creative ones: desaturated content, warm contrast, aged photo. I can convert to black and white. I can simulate infrared. Here, I can do a selenium tone, a sepia tone. I can do split tones. There are a number of options on the presets. However, for this photo, I'm not going to use any of the presets. I will also say, though, that there are a number of other presets available on the internet that you can download and apply. So the first thing that you want to do when you go to edit your photo is you want to set the profile correction. Every model of camera and every make of lens, or every model and make of lens, has a specific profile, because all lenses have a certain amount of distortion in them. So the very first thing that I want to do before I do any other editing is enable profile correction. Now, Lightroom generally can automatically detect the difference between lenses and makers. So most times when you click this button, it will automatically apply the correct one. If it does not, you can choose your lens make and model from the pull down menus on the side. And I'll turn it off so that you see the difference. Notice that there's some distortion in the center of the image and around the edges. And when I click enable profile correction, it flattens the image. Now, there is another thing that I generally need to do, which is remove this thing called chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberrations happen with certain lenses. It is not a function of the lens being a poor quality. It is simply a function of the way that the lens and the glass captures light. So to remove the chromatic aberration, which is a very faint purple line that you might see around some of these objects here, as I zoom in, you can very faintly see the edges of purple on the leaves. So I'll remove chromatic aberration, go to manual, and set the amount of defringe somewhere around 3 or 4, which will remove that very slight purple cast. Next, I will add sharpening. Sharpening just makes the image a little bit crisper. So I will add some sharpening. Now we'll edit a photo later where I'll use some of these other tools here, but for this image, I don't need to do anything other than adding sharpening. Next, we'll move up to the editing elements. I can adjust exposure. This holistically adjusts the exposure, lightening or darkening the image. Although in this particular case, the image does not need any adjustments, so I will leave that alone. You can always double click on a word to return it back to its original setting, the 0 position. Similarly, contrast lets me increase or reduce the contrast, making the brights brighter and the darks darker. Again, with this particular image, I'm not interested in doing that. One tool, and the first tool that I always go to generally, is under this presence area, and that's clarity. Removing clarity softens the image. It makes it look very dreamlike. Adding clarity crisps the image up, and it brings out fine detail. Because this is an image containing trees and tree leaves, I want to go with the highest clarity. In general, because of the types of things that I shoot, I generally prefer to add quite a bit of clarity to most of my images. Related to clarity is this item called dehaze. Dehaze is there to remove any atmospheric haze, but you can add in atmospheric haze by dropping it down to -100, and you can dramatically reduce atmospheric haze at 100. Moving it up punches colors in a different way than some of the other settings. Dehaze will also affect reflections to some extent and bring out skies. So on this image, I'm going to add just a tiny bit of dehaze to the image to get a little bit more detail out of the clouds. I can also adjust vibrance, which affects the overall color, and I can affect saturation, which also affects the overall color. Saturation and vibrance down at the bottom will give you a black and white image, and up to the top will give you a very artificially over-colored image. The next thing that I want to adjust here is the highlights and the shadows. You'll notice some areas are a little bit over bright. So if I bring the highlights down just a touch, I pull out just a tiny bit more definition into my clouds. But you'll notice that I've got a very dark part of the image on the right side. So to bring that up, I'll remove shadows and pull the shadows out. That gives me more image detail on the darks. Now, sometimes when you do this, an image will look a little bit crispy. So I might go back in and add just a touch more dehaze to make the image look a little bit better. Now, at this point, I have processed the image. It's not significantly what we would call over-processed. It looks quite natural. I'm now going to move to another image, and I'm going to show you some other tools. So I'm now going to go to this image. Now, I've got some stuff up here that I don't like. So I'm going to crop this image before I do anything else. I'm going to get rid of that little bit of extra on the edge and adjust the crop. I hit close. And now I've got those little tree limbs out of the corner of my image. Again, I come back, I enable my profile corrections. I'll remove chromatic aberration just in case there's anything there. And I will sharpen the image. Now, on this image, I want to do some very interesting edits. I want to adjust the color. I want the oranges and the reds to be the only color on the image. And I want to return everything else to essentially a black and white image. So to do that, I come to this HSL color rollout and I start to remove saturations. So I'll remove the greens. You notice how they fall away. I remove the blues, the aquas, the purples. I'll leave the magentas, and I'm going to pull the yellows down. Now, you'll notice what's happened when I've done this is now I only really see the colors of the leaves that have turned orange, and everything else has become basically black and white. This is an artistic move that helps me highlight the changing nature of these trees. I could, if I wanted to, even up the saturation of the yellows and oranges and magentas just a bit to make them pop even more. Next, I'm going to edit an image that is quite overdark. So this image is very underexposed. And I took this image to illustrate a couple of other things. So first, I'm going to adjust the exposure. I'm going to brighten the image up so that we see the image. Now, you'll notice that this histogram up at the top now has pulled away from where it was originally. The histogram will show you when you've got a nice balance of exposure. But you'll notice when I've done that, I've got a big spike here at the left end. So to resolve that, I can first try to play with the highlights, and I pull the highlights down, and now you'll notice that's gone away. But I've got this problem that, again, I call crispiness. So I can try to play with some clarity and some dehaze to see if that makes that center part look more normal. Doesn't quite, so I'll return the highlights back up a bit. And now I've got the image a little bit more balanced. But now I want to show you something else. This happens a lot with dark images. I've got this thing called noise. Noise is all of this graininess that you see in the image. Now, I can fix this noise under noise reduction, luminance. I can hit luminance and I can turn it up, and that noise starts to disappear. But notice that the more I turn that up, the more this turns into kind of a watercolor image, which again might be something that you want to do, but in this case it makes the trees look extraordinarily fake. So I find a reasonable balance of noise reduction where I might see the grain at close angles, but I don't see the grain as badly far away. Now, this image is slightly askew. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to come back to this crop tool and straighten the image up by rotating it. That allows me to get the image rotated into position. The next tool that I'm going to show is a tool called the merge tool. Merge allows me to put together a series of images and merge them into a panoramic shot. So in this case, I'm going to select 4 images. You see them down here at the bottom. And I come up to the photo tool, photo pull down, go to photo merge, and merge to panorama. This tool allows me to merge the images into a panoramic view. Now, there's 3 different sorts of panorama. There's a spherical, a cylindrical, and a perspective. And you want to choose the one that looks the closest to the way that you want it to look. So I'll go with spherical here, and I'll hit the merge button. It takes a couple of minutes for this to process. The more images that you've got that you're combining, the longer the merge process will take. But once it's merged, then it's created an entirely new image that I can now edit. Now, you'll notice that I've got a lot of white space around this image. So I need to take care of that. But before I even do that, I am going to enable my profile correction, and I'm going to remove chromatic aberration. I'm also going to do my sharpening, and then I come up here and I use my crop tool. Now, because I didn't take a perfect panorama, I'll crop that to there, and I'll move these and adjust these until I get the white gone. Now, you can further edit an image and drag things around in Photoshop with the warp tool. But in this particular case, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do this. Going to now pause for a moment for any questions. So now, the next tool that I'm going to show will be to edit a photo in black and white. So I'm going to take another photo. I'm going to straighten this up because it's at a little bit of an angle. And now I'm going to use one of my presets, and I'm going to turn this to black and white. Now I'm going to look at all of the different black and whites and see which one I like the best, and which one is the look that I want the most. And in this particular case, I'm going to go with the black and white landscape. Again, turn on my profile corrections. Because I've gone to black and white, there's no need to remove a chromatic aberration because that just by the nature of this disappears. I'll adjust to add a little bit more clarity, and you notice how that affects the sky. Going to drop the highlights down just a tiny bit. And you can use your left and right arrow keys. Oops. You can use your left and right arrow keys to drop by very small increments. Now, one thing I also want to show you with the black and white, I've got a nice dark sky. If I want to add more black to it, I could turn the blue down. I'm going to undo that because I actually was quite happy with where the black was. And that is editing that. So now, when I'm ready to export files, I'll select all of the images that I want to export. So I'm going to select the images that I want to export at this time. And once I've selected them, I'll come up to the File pull down, Export, and then I do the export setup. So I choose a folder that I want to export to. And in this case, because this is Batsford Arboretum, and this is fall of 2022, I will make a folder to export to for that, and I'll select the folder. Now, I can add watermarks or anything else that I want to. It is also important to know what formats you're exporting to. Right now, it's exporting to a JPEG. So I will export. It's also exporting at a resolution of 240 pixels per inch. I can change that if I want to. I could export as a TIFF, but I'm choosing to leave it as a JPEG. I'm exporting at 100% quality, which is the highest quality. And I'm going to let it be at 240 pixels per inch. It does not matter at this stage what this resolution is, because if I wanted to manipulate the image in Photoshop, I can adjust that resolution. This is the native resolution of this file. So I hit export. And the file now exports. This concludes this tutorial.